Story 1. I knew a couple who were married for years. The wife became pregnant about year 10 of the marriage. The husband left her because he decided the day the baby was born that he didn't want children. Story 2. My ex divorced me after his best friend died of a drug overdose. He left me to be with his best friend's girlfriend. He felt he needed to take care of her, now that his friend was gone. We had only just met her at the funeral. They broke up within 2 weeks. Story 3. A colleague I used to work with divorced his wife during her first round of chemotherapy. He explained that her hair had started to fall out and that the prospect of not being able to pull her hair during intimacy for at least 2 years was too much of a sacrifice. He tried his hardest to play the victim after that when everybody in the office stopped talking to him. Edit. Willie, if you're reading this, I hope you face consequences for your actions and end up alone. Story 4. I don't think it was a divorce, but my favorite is still the "you smell" guy. This guy kept telling his significant other that she stinks. He'd tell her to go get a shower. "I don't know why I put up with you. You smell so bad," etc. It had been going on for years, and she had seen doctors and other professionals, and had even purchased medical-grade deodorants and soaps. She could never smell it, so she would ask her friends, and then be like, "You're fine." But the minute her boyfriend/husband/whatever came home, he'd be like, "Oh my God, you stink." Finally, she freaks out and says, "We just need to break up then because I don't know what's wrong with me, and it's clearly making you unhappy, and I don't think I stink at all, and I've been doing everything I can, so we just need to break up." He breaks down and admits that his dad has done that to his mother their whole married life and told him to do it to his significant other. That is, the original poster, because if he could keep her insecure enough, she would never leave him. So the whole thing was a lie. She dumped him. Story 5. She accused him of having an affair with his boss. As she was a relative, we believed her. However, I encountered the man a few years later, and it turned out he had evidence of her being involved with at least 4 different men while they were married. She fabricated the story to save face. That led to one awkward Christmas afterwards. Story 6. My history teacher in high school was married to a woman who had escaped from a Magdalene laundry in the 80s. Less than a year into their marriage, she started having seizures that had no visible physical or neurological cause and couldn't be controlled with medication. Eventually, the hypothesis was that the seizures were caused by the trauma she suffered in the Magdalene laundry, but they couldn't figure out how to treat them. By then, the seizures had damaged her brain so much that she was functioning on the level of a toddler. There was eventually a new anticonvulsant that came out and was able to control her seizures, but the brain damage was permanent. This wasn't the cause of their divorce. My teacher stayed married to her for another 30-odd years. He got her in-home care while he was working and took care of her himself when he was home. The actual cause of the divorce was that my teacher was about to retire, and he wouldn't have been able to afford the level of home care his wife needed on his pension, even with him being home more and the government subsidies that are available in our province, so she needed to be placed in a long-term care home. The problem was, long-term care homes at the time were prioritizing admitting people with absolutely no potential family support. The fact that they were married would have left her on the wait list for a spot in long-term care for 3 to 7 years. He had to divorce her in order to get her the care she needed. Story 7. This is not the only reason why we divorced, but my former husband and I fought a lot because I would not make an appointment for him at my gynecologist's. I worked in the office. He was not transgender. He had male genitalia. There was literally no reason for him to see a gynecologist. It was a huge bone of contention in our marriage. He did not have concerns about male breast tissue. His reason was that he thought it was unfair that a doctor could choose to treat women only. He found the focus of gynecological science on women to be discriminatory against men. I was never able to convince him that a gynecologist specializes in care related to the uterus and that there's no reason for a cisgender man to see one. In his mind, he felt oppressed. Editing again to add that I was the person who answered the phone and set appointments for patients. He didn't want me to call on his behalf. Story 8. My cousin's boyfriend broke up with her because he received a visit from the Virgin Mary in a dream, who told him that from now on he should remain chaste. P.S. He is not religious and, of course, has another girl now. Story 9. My family actually has a family law firm, so I grew up with strange stories of divorce. The strangest reason for a divorce? A wife didn't like that her husband made her ex, from a previous marriage, look pathetic to the wife's family during a holiday barbecue. Apparently, the husband was noticeably better with the grill than the ex, and the wife felt that the husband had emasculated the ex on purpose. And before anyone suggests it, no, the wife was not having an affair with her ex. She was having an affair with her stylist. The dumbest reason for a divorce? A husband idolized his own father, so when his parents got divorced because his dad thought his wife was getting old and he should find a young trophy wife, spoiler, he didn't. The husband filed for divorce so he could act as his dad's wingman without any guilt. Story 10. I read about this on a different Reddit post. Her husband was purposely over-tightening every jar of food in the house. She finally snapped after he said he would stop, and when he started again a few weeks later, she filed for divorce. Story 11. I saw this one on Reddit. A guy absolutely hates Star Trek and refuses to have it in his house. His girlfriend loves science fiction and Star Trek specifically. They get married. Naturally, the girl wants to watch Star Trek, but the new husband won't let her. They divorce some time later. Story 12. There was a story on Reddit about a man divorcing a woman because she lived according to a very precise beige color scheme and would toss out any item, including baby toys and clothes, that didn't fit that scheme. This culminated in a bunch of lovingly knit sweaters the mother-in-law had made. It didn't help that this woman came across as utterly irrational and abusive. So that's that. In real life, I've seen mothers and fathers decide that parenthood just isn't for them and bail out, dumping their kids and marriage and disappearing. In one case, both the mother and the father didn't want the kid, so they fought each other to force the other one to have full custody of the kid. Can you believe it? They'd go to the judge and argue against their fitness as parents and argue that the kid was the fault of the other parent. Needless to say, the kid is completely messed up and does not talk to his parents anymore. Story 13. I heard a story about a man who was learning to play the violin while his partner was learning the accordion. They agreed to stop learning at the same time to save their marriage. Story 14. I got divorced from my partner for tax reasons. Her employer sent her on a prolonged work assignment to Belgium, which requires both spouses in a marriage to declare tax in Belgium, regardless of whether they live there. Neither one of us wanted to deal with the extra tax complexity, and we had gotten married mostly because we thought it might make life easier should we have moved to a country where there would be tax benefits, etc. Ironically, the complex Belgium tax system was the exact opposite. I don't remember the exact duration, but I think we were only married for about 6 to 9 months. We stayed together as a couple for several more years, but ultimately split up for other reasons. Story 15. A married couple owned a semi-detached house. They wanted to obtain a mortgage to purchase the house next door and combine it into one large property. However, the bank would not allow them to take out a second mortgage based on their joint earnings. As a result, they divorced through a quick, no-fault divorce process. One of them retained ownership of the house. Subsequently, the other applied for a mortgage independently to buy the next-door house. The mortgage was approved, and the second house was purchased. They then merged the two houses by creating a doorway at the top of the landing stairs. After completing this, they remarried each other. Story 16. I know a couple for whom the last straw was my father making a joke at the wife's expense, and the husband laughing at the joke. For context, they had been on the rocks for a while but were doing counseling and other things to try to save the marriage. At their son's birthday party, my dad was lighting the candles. The wife asked, "Why did you start from the edge instead of the middle?" Dad said, "I was worried you'd have nothing to complain about." The husband laughed, the wife stormed out, and they divorced. Story 17. They got married in college and divorced by the time he got into medical school. Her reasoning was, "He doesn't make any money. The guy is a heart surgeon in Chicago now." Story 18. Long ago, like way back when I was just a tiny little pre-license, I had a couple who had differences about what the man ate. It was not because it smelled weird when cooking. It was not because it violated her religious beliefs or something. No, it was just the idea of him eating bacon, pork, ham, etc., and she wasn't Jewish or Muslim. I suspected this issue was cloaking something much deeper, but I never got to find that out. I saw them for 3 to 4 sessions and they vamoosed. About 2 months later, she emailed saying sorry, but they'd had a huge fight over the Easter ham and she had had enough. She filed for divorce. Takes all kinds to make the world go round, I guess. Story 19. A man and a woman had 3 or 4 children. She was a large woman and not considered attractive. Her husband adored her. Then, the wife was diagnosed with cancer, leading to significant weight loss. Fortunately, she survived, and though some weight returned, she began to attract the attention of other men, something she greatly enjoyed. She started to frequent bars at night and stay out late. Eventually, she sat her husband down and told him she believed she could do better than him, given her newfound options. She packed her belongings and left her husband and children, showing no sign of remorse. She explained that surviving cancer provided her with a second chance at a better life, and she was determined not to waste it. Story 20. My coworker's daughter divorced her husband right after their honeymoon because he was so cheap he wouldn't let her eat out on their honeymoon. They had to get things from the grocery store for the mini fridge, and that was all they were allowed to eat because it was a waste of their money now that they were married. But it was fine when she paid for meals out before they were married. I think it was technically an annulment. She didn't want to be married to a cheap person her whole life. Story 21. I knew a couple who had been together for more than 20 years, but all of a sudden, they both filed for divorce because they argued about where to put their toothbrushes in the bathroom. They have 3 kids, never went to marriage counseling, and both have successful careers and are very popular in their communities. I'm fairly certain there's more to the story than that. Story 22. A friend of mine divorced her husband over a cocktail. He didn't drink. She drank occasionally. They always split the bill except if she ordered an alcoholic beverage. Then she would pay for it. Ironically, his non-alcoholic drinks cost more than her alcoholic drinks. Expensive mocktails, smoothies, etc. A crowd of about 8 of us went out for dinner. After dinner, she ordered her first alcoholic drink, a cocktail. He told the waiter no, cancel it. She said yes, she wants it. He said no, she said yes, he said no, yes, no. This went on for ages, and bear in mind, she was paying for it anyway. She walked out and filed for divorce. He refused to pay for her dinner. I paid for her and said, consider it her first divorce present. Story 23. I saw an Am I the A-hole post yesterday where the guy wanted a divorce and was questioning the paternity of his child after his wife, who has been entirely faithful for more than a decade, went to a bachelorette party with a stripper there. In fact, most of the weirdest reasons for divorce I read about are on there. Story 24. I went on a date one time with a man who had divorced his wife because she was just sad all the time and I just couldn't take it anymore. It had been like 3 months and she would still cry when she heard his favorite song. Her dad had passed from a heart attack at the age of 52, but this man had the audacity to believe she should have expected it. All parents die at some point. Sure, maybe if he had been 92, it wouldn't have been as much of a shock, but it would still be something to be sad about and grieve. I put my head down until I could catch the waiter and then left the date abruptly. Imagine if this man ever found out I had checked myself into the hospital for a 72-hour watch 2 years after my mom passed because the grief finally caught up with me. Story 25. Not a divorce, but my friend broke up with his longtime Jewish girlfriend because, as a Southern Baptist, he just couldn't get past the fact that her people killed Christ. Story 26. The wife received a visa to Australia, but he did not. They were attempting to leave communist Poland together, so she went ahead with their small child. By the time he was able to join them, they had grown so used to being apart that they just didn't want to be married anymore. They are still very close friends, but both have remarried and live separately. Story 27. The husband faked having been in the military to impress his wife while they were still dating, as her dad was in the military. He went to great lengths to continue this lie as the relationship progressed. He wore a military uniform to the wedding and fake timelines in his life. After the wedding, he was pressured into getting a government-issue loan for a house, and that's when the story fell apart. Turns out he bought the uniform off eBay. Story 28. They divorced over a game of Monopoly. They both thought they were cheating at Monopoly. It escalated to shouting, then fighting until they both got mad and started sawing furniture in half. 3 days later, they divorced. She lives in France. He lives in Botswana now. Story 29. My ex's parents divorced but continued to live together as husband and wife. The reason for the divorce was to separate their finances due to the husband's excessive spending, a car accident causing insurance to rise, and poor credit, among others.